Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Genesis Invitational Initial Research Show. Exciting finish to the Waste Management Phoenix Open. I know the Super Bowl is happening right now, so hopefully you're able to join me either at halftime or in between the commercial breaks and whatnot. But first, I have a couple of shouts to give. The big winner this week was, again, Pop's Call. He comes in second in a tiers contest, so congratulations to you. I myself had a top 20 wager that hit on Wyndham Clark. I also had a very successful DFS week. Did not come in second in any contest, but it was a successful week in DFS. But if you had a successful week, if you had a hit on an outright wager or a big hit, or you are proud of your performance in DFS, please reach out to me via social media or in the comments of this video. Would love to shout out members of the community that have a successful week. But we move from the first full field premier or designated event on the PGA Tour, and they're backing it right up with the Genesis Invitational. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I post research throughout the week regarding some course history or former winners, things of that nature. So if you want to see a summary of the research that I do, give me a follow at those places. My betting cards are also put out on Twitter every Wednesday evening. So if you want to see my betting cards for the week, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then lastly, in the description, there is a link to my Twitch channel. This is where I host all of my very in-depth research. I also go back to previous weeks. For example, tomorrow morning I will be critiquing my Waste Management Phoenix Open mixed condition model. I'll show you my lineups that I played, what I should have done, could have done better, thinking and all that stuff. So if you want to see the in-depth research for the Genesis Invitational, if you want to see my critique of the waste management, how I go about updating all of my spreadsheets and such, give me a follow and subscribe over to my Twitch channel, and you'll be in on all of that. But finally, for the intro, we're live. Chat's open. Again, hopefully you are able to join me throughout the Super Bowl. How did your week end up going with the Waste Management Phoenix Open? Did you have any outright hits? How was your DFS? How was your weekend showdown? Lineups if you played that. What are you looking forward to for the Genesis Invitational? All of that good stuff. So, without any further ado, let's do our initial research for the 2023 Genesis Invitational. And a little bit of a different start this evening. Hopefully my camera will focus in here. Oh, there we go. A little bit of a different start this evening. The GCSA tournament fact sheet is not out yet. It is not out yet. So we're going to jump straight to Fantasy National, and we will start the Data Dive show tomorrow with the GCSA tournament fact sheet. But we, as you can imagine, with the second straight premier or designated event, it is another big field in Los Angeles, California at Riviera Country Club. You see here, I've got it sort just on strokes gained total for this PGA Tour season, but John Rahm, Max Homa, Taylor Montgomery, Tony Finau, Jason Day, Tom Kim, Scotty Scheffler, Sung Jae, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, everybody is here this week at one of the most iconic courses on the PGA Tour. And the biggest news is Tiger Woods is also in the field. Yes, the big cat himself is playing this week where his career got started. So it's a very, very exciting week again on the PGA Tour. So before we dig into a whole lot in terms of the Riviera Country Club, let's just kind of take a look at it from a course breakdown or Fantasy National scorecard and graphical type view. And you see here that there looks to be a lot of scoring chances, and that is simply not the case. So first thing I like to do, 9th and 10th most difficult holes, we search for the 9th over par, the 10th is still over par, the 11th most difficult hole is still over par. You have to go to the 12th most difficult hole, the par 3 16th, before you reach par. Not only that, and so that would signify that it's difficult. Not only that, you have several holes that approach a quarter of a shot over par. The most difficult hole, almost 3/10. A quarter of a shot over par. Third most difficult, 2/10. 2/10. Almost 2/10. Almost 2/10. There are a lot of bogeys around Riviera Country Club. Having said that, probably the iconic hole of the course, the par 5 first, the massive downhill par 5, does play almost 3/4 of a shot under par. It is a great eagle chance. It is definitely a scoring hole, but then the course really toughens up after that. So not a whole lot of scoring chances here at Riviera, and we will see that in the prior course conditions, how difficult this tournament has generally been in years past. So you do have a fantastic eagle chance with the opening hole, the par 5 11th. Also, not necessarily the best eagle chance. It does yield a decent amount of eagles, but it's certainly a scoring opportunity playing to 3/10 under par. But very quickly you approach par with the 14th, the 13th, and the 12th most difficult holes playing at par. And you've got several holes that play to 2/10 to a quarter of a shot over par. There are bogeys galore here. We move down to the average strokes gained by shot type. You see putting far outweighing basically anything else, even to the approach. Almost, it's a full 10th, not even almost. It is a full 10th of a shot more important per round. The difference here than last week, the around the green is going to be the big factor this week as opposed to off the tee. So you see the graph for the top 10s, and it is a short game course. Again, probably makes some sense considering the difficulty of the course. You're going to have to scramble. You're going to have to be hitting around the green. Now for the top 5s, your approach does surpass putting. The off the tee does try to catch up, but it's still behind around the green. And then for your winners, approach, putting still up there, but look at the massive jump from around the green. Just a massive jump for your winners in strokes gained around the green. So definitely a factor we're going to be using this week. If we come back to the top 10s and look for average strokes gained by hole by par, you see the par 5s are leading, but it is still fairly close across all 3 par designation holes, especially the 5s and the 4s. Very, very close. The par 3s do trail off a little bit. Then for the top 5s, the par 3s start to lag behind the 4s and the 5s quite a bit. And then for your winners, pretty consistent. Pretty consistent difference between all 3 par designations across your top 10s. Par 3s do lag for your top 5 finishers, but overall, it's pretty balanced. It's just a difficult course. You have an easy par 5 that you have to get. You got a couple of scoring opportunities on a par 4 or 2 par 4s that are scoring opportunities, maybe a par 3. Otherwise, it's pretty difficult. If we move to the hole composition, we see the par 3s pretty evenly split. You've got a short par 3, 2 medium length par 3s and a long par 3 at 225 plus on the scorecard. You do have the drivable par 4 10th, not too dissimilar from the 17th this past week at the Waste Management. However, there's no water on the 10th. It's just a very, very narrow green protected by bunkers and a horrendously sloped green. That is the fun of that hole. So you do have a drivable par 4. You've got 4 short par 4s, 6 medium length or medium to long par 4s. So we'll see if this is indeed the most important factor in hole types. And then for par 5s, again, you have the very short opening downhill par 5, 503, and plays enormously downhill. So it's essentially is a par 4 for PGA professionals. And then 2 longer par 5s that measure between 550 and 600. Approach shot distribution, the majority of approach shots, especially compared to the PGA Tour average event, comes from 150 to 175. Now you do have a fair share of approach shots that come from 175 and beyond, but in relation to the PGA Tour average tour event, 150 to 175 is the main length of approach shots. So again, especially tomorrow in Fantasy on the Data Dive show, in the prior leaderboards from Fantasy National and in Microsoft Excel, we're going to see and scrutinize if this approach shot tends to determine who rises on the leaderboard. But for your information, beginning of the week, you might want to focus on the top players from 150 to 175 yards. Speaking to the difficulty of the tournament, looking at the historic cut line, all the way back to 2003, it has never been under par. The lowest it has ever been even par, and that's only been twice. It hasn't been even par in more than a decade. Now, it has gotten to -1 in recent years. It usually hovers in the -1, -2, -3 range, which if it's sitting at -2, it is right on the verge of difficult. Still technically average, but certainly pushing difficult. -1, still in average territory, but still leaning on the difficult end. So nothing easy here at the Genesis. Scoring distribution, the bogeys, 17, almost 18%. Birdies, a little bit under the bogeys, and we have a bar that can be seen on the bogeys, on the doubles. So you stack those two on top of each other, more than the birdies. My guess when we go to Microsoft Excel tonight is that bogey avoidance is going to be a bigger factor than birdies gained. But I've been wrong before. Shocker, I know. But I've been wrong before. So we'll see. But I have, at least graphically and by scorecard and historic cut line, all of that type stuff, would tend to make me think that bogey avoidance is more important. Driving accuracy here, lower than the average tour event. Again, speaking to the speaking to the difficulty. Having said that, sometimes players just don't care, and they just try to hit it far knowing that the rough isn't penal. That's actually not the case here. The average distance of a drive at Riviera is slightly less than the average tour event. That just, again, speaks to the difficulty of off the tee here. The fairways are difficult to hit at Riviera. Green and regulation percentage, massively lower. 57, almost 58% here at Riviera to 66% on the average tour event. So 8% less greens and regulation here at Riviera. That tells you everything you need to know about difficulty. Now, having said that, players that are having to scramble are more successful here than the average tour event. It's the fact that you have to scramble so many times. You're scrambling for pars, and you're doing that much more often throughout a round than usual on the PGA Tour. Average 3 putts per round, higher than the average tour event. If you remember from Pebble Beach and the Farmers, those weeks, Riviera is actually a comp course specifically for POA putting. And yes, we didn't have the GCSA tournament fact sheet, but these are POA greens. So these are fast, undulating greens, slopey greens, and 3 putts tend to rear their ugly head here at Riviera. We talked about the driving distance, green and regulation proximity, slightly further away by 3/4 of a foot. So nothing astronomical. We'll see if proximity tends to be a leading factor, but green and regulation prox is slightly further away than the average tour event. So that is a look at Riviera Country Club from a I almost said GCSAA, from a scorecard and graphical view at Fantasy National. So let's move to the players that are in the field. Actually, before that, let's go ahead and take a look at the historic conditions. And we see that majority of the time, the course is measuring 72 to 7,400 yards. There was a year in 2019, it did measure over 7,400. That looks to be the exception. So I'm probably not going to do anything with length tonight, especially since the GCSA tournament fact sheet is not out. However, what we can do, we can look at POA greens. These have always been classified as POA, all back to 2012. You can see they have always been fast. Every single round, they have been classified as fast. So we're going to be looking at fast POA greens. And then looking at the scoring relative to par, last year there was one easy round, but generally it plays average to difficult. Now, there are easy-ish rounds out there if the wind really dies down or the pin placements are in very easy spots, but you can see the number of difficult rounds compared to easy. So with that, if I use a scoring filter tonight and tomorrow, it'll be difficult, but I am wanting to hold off and see how the GCSA tournament fact sheet lays out the course before I want to set it in stone. So with that, one of the first things that I'm going to do, we know that these are POA greens. These are fast POA greens. I am hesitant to use lightning, although you could certainly make an argument for it. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of 2020. I believe that's what we did for Pebble Beach and the Farmers. I want to go to the beginning of 2020, not December. So again, I don't like going back that far, but when you have 2 specific filters, one of them POA greens that are so uncommon on the PGA Tour, you got to go back enough ways to get significant amounts of data or significant data to make it worth your while to search. And as you see, of the players in the field this week, 35 rounds is the most, going all the way back to 2010. And most of these players have anywhere in the teens, maybe to low 20s. And you will still have players that have single digits amount of rounds, if any at all. So with that, since 2010, your top putters on specifically fast POA greens have been Kevin Kisner, Adam Scott, Denny McCarthy, Matt Kuchar, Maverick McNeely, Mackenzie Hughes, Troy Merritt, JT Poston, Jordan Spieth, and Sepp Straka. So give those players an asterisk or take a look at them early on this week for putting. Again, with this being POA, it would also behoove you to look at some prior POA putting. Take a look at, again, the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, how players typically putt there, how they putt at Torrey Pines. That's always POA. Club de Golf Chapultepec, the WGC Mexico, if you are able to find putting stats from those tournaments. but those were also on POA. So with that, I'm going to remove these filters, and let's just take a look at some overarching metrics here. I'm definitely going to have to bring this in we'll go to this PGA Tour season. And again, tomorrow in the data dive, if I feel comfortable that it'll be difficult, or if the GCSA posts that it's going to be over 7,400 yards or close to it, I might do some long course metrics. But until then, I'm just going to keep it like I did for the waste management, and just no filters, just an overarching feel or view of these players and how they've performed this PGA Tour season. So, since the start of the PGA Tour season, going back to the Fortinet in the fall, your top strokes gained approach players have been Tom Hoge, Tom Kim, Nick Hardy, Russell Knox, Siwoo Kim, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Colin Morikawa, Adam Hadwin, Brendan Steele, and Danny Lee. I have actually not checked to see if Waste Management Phoenix Open is in. It is. So we will definitely be looking at that tomorrow over on Twitch as I gather all the statistics from this year's Waste Management, throwing them into my comparison course chart and all that stuff. So this is updated for today and this weekend's tournament, so that's good to know. But there's your top strokes gained approach players. We saw in the course breakdown that around the green is going to be a decent factor. So your top strokes gained around the green players since the start of the PGA Tour season: Christian Bezadenhout, Scott Piercy, Justin Thomas, Ben On, Brendan Todd, Mackenzie Hughes, Hideki, Robbie Shelton, David Lipsky, and Matt Wallace. So none of those players are top 10 in both around the green and approach. The closest is Robbie Shelton. He is 16th in approach, 8th in around the green, but is generally not a good putter. And I don't think he has been particularly good. Well, having said that, POA, he is actually positive. So Robbie Shelton might be somebody to keep an eye on early on this week, especially in any outright wager markets. So there's a look at that. Again, don't feel too comfortable doing long course or any difficulty metrics per se. I think one thing we might be able to do, because these fairways are so very difficult to hit, right under 55%, where the tour average is 62%, we can take a look at strokes gained off the tee when fairways are difficult to hit. That might be worthwhile. So, we're going to definitely have to expand this to all of 2022 just to get, again, enough rounds to make it statistically significant. But your top off-the-tee players, strokes gained off the tee, when fairways are difficult to hit, your top 10 are Brendan Steele, John Rahm, Cameron Champ, Cameron Young, Sung Jae, Patrick Cantley, Adam Scott, Keith Mitchell, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Corey Connors. So again, no real surprise here. These are your elite off the players in terms of either they have massive amounts of distance or they combine distance and fairways. And generally, you're seeing these are your players, with the exception of maybe Brendan Steele and Cameron Champ. These are your players that are contending for majors year in and year out. So the Genesis can feel like a major. Can feel like a major from time to time. But I think that is all I want to do in terms of specifics or specific statistic digging tonight. Let's just go ahead and go straight to the tournament history tab here in Fantasy National. This is your top performers with listed in strokes gained total in the past 5 years at the Genesis Invitational, and this has been played at Riviera for a long time, so we don't have to worry about splitting out the course or anything like that. Your top strokes gained total player in the past 5 years is Adam Scott. You see, he's the winner in 2020. He has one clunker of a made cut back in 2018, but otherwise generally plays this event very, very well. Top 5 last year, the aforementioned win, top 10 in 2019. Your defending champion, however, not allowed to participate. Joaquin Niemann is your defending champion. Of course, he has moved on to LIV. Max Homa, your winner in 2021. 2019, JB Holmes was your winner. And then 2018, I believe, was another LIV player. And escaping me now, unfortunately. But top strokes gained total player, Adam Scott. Tony Finau has played this event extremely well. 2 runner-ups, another top 15. So he's played extremely well. Xander Schauffele makes a lot of sense, a California guy. Now, he does not have the podium finishes like Adam Scott, Tony Finau, Max Homa. He's just very, very consistent here. Nothing worse than a T23. He's got 4 top 15s in the past 5 years here at Riviera. One top 10 in the aforementioned T23. Max Homa, 4 for 4. So he might actually be the strokes gained total leader in terms of average per tournament. He's got a win in 2021, a top 5, a top 10, and then a middling finish, but only in 4 years. And he's the 4th highest in terms of strokes gained total. He's played well here. Patrick Cantlay, again, another California guy. Rory has played extremely well here. John Rahm, Justin Thomas is a bit of all or nothing here. 3 for 5 in terms of making the cut, but all 3 cuts made are top 10s, one of them being a runner-up. Victor Hovland is 2 for 2 with 2 top 5s, so he definitely challenges Max Homa in terms of the highest strokes gained total per tournament. Some other notables here: James Hahn has played extremely well here. Colin Morikawa, Patrick Rogers, who had a fantastic waste management, a fantastic Sunday, specifically to the waste management. Hideki, Jordan Spieth's 5 for 5. A little bit lacking in terms of upper leaderboard success, but is 5 for 5. Of course, Cameron Young, his runner-up finish last year. Wyndham Clark, Scotty Scheffler. These guys, again, a lot more off-the-tee type players, especially distance. Give or take a few players. Matt Kuchar's up here. He's played extremely well, which would make some sense with the around the green being so important. But for the most part, Adam Scott, Tony Finau, Xander, Max Homa, Cantlay, Rahm, Rory, these guys are off the tee. They have the distance and are able to hit plenty of fairways to go with it. Now, at the other end, players that have not played this event very well. Cameron Champ, we saw how he was number 3 in terms of off the tee when fairways are difficult to hit. Of course, all of that is coming in terms of distance, but if you're not able to find a fairway from time to time, you're going to really struggle. Cameron Champ has really struggled at this tournament. He's only 1 for 4. Robert Streb, 0 for 4. Again, Brendan Steele, he was the number 1 off the tee player when fairways are difficult to hit. He's only 2 for 4 here. Joel Damon, a lot like Justin Thomas, has all or nothing type finishes. He's missed the cut in 3. He has a top 5 in one of the past 5 years. So Joel Damon, a lot of all or nothing here. Elsewhere, Peter Malnati has struggled. Johnny Vegas has struggled here, and that's a little surprising to see considering off the tee might be something. But there it is. Johnny Vegas struggling. Kevin Tway, Corey Connors 0 for 3 here. Troy Merritt 1 for 4. So there's a few of the players that have struggled here at Riviera in the past 5 years. Kind of flying through this show tonight. Again, Super Bowl Sunday, and with no GCSA tournament fact sheet, was going to be a little bit of a shorter show anyway. With that, let's go on to Microsoft Excel, and I will bring you to, if I figure out where in the world my life is right now, let's look at the comparison course chart for Riviera and the Genesis in general. You see, off the tee, 24% less important than the average full field course. It's just not a big thing here. We saw that graphically. It's all in and around the green, and a little bit of putting, but all of it in around the green. It is a massive aspect of Riviera. We move to driving statistics. Now, distance does matter here for your players that have averaged a top 30 finish or who have finished in the top 30 the past 5 years. So 45% more important, very similar to the waste management. So it looks like I'm going to be doing some more in distance. Hey, James, thanks for jumping in chat. How did it go? Are you talking about my lineups for the week? It was positive. It was a very good week. I mentioned, Terrell Hatton. I hope people listen on Terrell Hatton. That he is criminally underused in difficult and big tournaments like the waste management. I had Ricky, who backed up my bold suggestion. Kevin Tway, although I think he fell down in the standings a little bit, he was a bold suggestion at 6,300, paid off. Of course, I said Xander and Scotty. Scotty was my number 2 player in the 10K. It was a very successful DFS. I did hit one top 20, no win wagers, none of the parlays that I had hit. Cantley really struggled, which surprised me, but overall, DFS-wise, it was a successful week, and the big winner was Popskull, who got second in a tiers contest. But how was your weekend golf? I know you were there Friday evening for the Friday Night Chill stream. How did that go? I know Gary Woodland struggled Saturday and then came back and played well today. Matt Fitzpatrick had a very good day today. Those were 2 players I was really, really high on for weekend. Homa, Sung Jae. So how did your weekend / round 3, round 4 showdown lineups come out? But thanks for jumping in chat. But coming back to Riviera, you see distance going to be a big thing. Fairways, 53% less important. So at least for the guys that finish inside the top 30, fairways has never been really a thing that they've had to worry about. Instead, you've got greens slightly higher than the average full field course. So again, this might be another week like the waste management where I'm just focusing on distance. We look at scoring, and as I suspected, birdies are actually negative in terms of importance. You have to avoid the bogeys here. Pars at Riviera are good scores, generally speaking. There are some holes not, but generally speaking, pars are good scores. So if you can avoid the bogeys, you are making up a lot of ground on the field. So we're going to be looking at bogey avoidance. And this Eagles game number is intriguing because you do have the first hole that is one of the best eagle chances on the PGA Tour. You do have another par 5 that yields an eagle about 1.5% of the time. So it's going to warrant some attention tomorrow over on Twitch to dig into this Eagles games number. But for now, tonight, I'm just focusing on the bogeys avoided, and you can see that that my initial thought process is correct, that I thought bogeys was going to be more important. We move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s, slightly more important than the average full field course. The 2 par 5s, the 2 par 3s that measure 175 to 200 seem to be, I was going to say the most important. This one is saying it's the most, but there's only one hole that measures here on the scorecard. There's only one hole that measures here on the scorecard. So I'm a little wary of making this the focal point of par 3s until we go through some prior leaderboards tomorrow in the Data Dive show. The par 3s do seem to have a little bit of significance here at Riviera. Par 4s, you've got the drivable, but not every course has a drivable par 4, so very wary of putting a lot of stock into that. These par 4s, unlike Phoenix, the par 4s were a little bit more hidden in terms of their importance, but they're very important in general. I don't know if the par 4s are going to be a big deal here at the Genesis. I'm just not sure yet. But what we can see is that 450 to 500, just like the Waste Management at Phoenix, the 450 to 500s were 86% more important. Here at Riviera, they're 52% more important. So another week where we're going to be focusing on 450 to 500 par 4s. And then finally, par 5s, you see they say that they are just not important at all. I don't know if I believe that, but clearly, compared to other full field courses, compared to other full field courses, they're just not as important. But they are the best scoring opportunities here, so I think it would be erroneous to ignore the par 5s, but it might not be a whole lot of consideration. And if there is, you see that in the individual lengths, this is the closest by a long shot to the full field course average. So probably 550 to 600 is where we're going to put our focus in par 5s. It'll be interesting. Proximity total 44%. For the Waste Management, it was only 28%. So interesting to see the total procs for the Genesis is more important. But the length of approach shot, the most common length of approach shot here, doesn't look to lead to direct correlating success, at least in this initial look. Of course, we'll go through the prior leaderboards tomorrow night in the Data Dive show and really scrutinize it, but perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps total procs is going to be the thing we look at Riviera. 175 to 200. There are a fair share of approach shots that come from these ranges as well. So you don't want to put everything in the 150 to 175, but it might be another week of total procs. And then I did see this graphically over on Fantasy National. Putting 0 to 5 feet looked to have some added significance. So we might look at that tomorrow as well. But there is Riviera in terms of comparing against other courses. I want to take a look at some of these specific numbers here and get a feel. Approach, the putting number is actually the highest. Having said that, that is a very, very low outlier. If we take that out, still doesn't quite reach the putting, but the approach does get very, very close to other course averages. So that is a very low outlier for distance. So distance is going to be another thing we're probably going to focus on this week. Again, birdies and bogeys, look here. Just a very consistent metric and one that is outweighing the birdies quite heavily. So we're going to be focusing on bogeys. But this is where I want to get to, the par 3s, 4s, and 5s, and see where all of these strokes are coming from. Par 3s have been fairly consistent, and they've been fairly consistent on the rise the past 5 years. So perhaps a little bit more importance might need to go into these par 3s, but there's no real massive length that or massive number that signifies this length or other lengths of par 3s are most important. It's pretty evenly spread out. So looks like it would just be par 3s total. Par 4s. So remember, on the scorecard you've got 1 here, 4, and 6. So you see the biggest number is clearly coming in the 450 to 500. Now that is a massively high outlier. So if we remove that, these two become very, very close in terms of actual raw importance. And if we scroll across, it brings it down quite a bit. I think it was in the 50-something%. So now it's 33. Okay. But again, I always like looking at the raw numbers too, just so I'm not misled by percentages. So looks like 450 to 500 is going to be the most important. However, that is a very big outlier. So, and look there, that's a very big outlier for par fours as well. And then par fives, it's a very, very low number that we have here in the par fives. But you see more than half of your strokes gained in par fives are coming in the 550 to 600. So if you have a length that's making up at least half, if not more, that's generally the range that you want to focus on. And look how consistent this this metric is. 0.48 is the lowest, 0.53 or 0.54 is the highest. So that's a very consistent metric, as well as a massive amount in terms of making up the entirety of the par fives. So 550 to 600 is where we're going to be looking to start this week. And then lastly, proximity. That's a pretty big outlier here. You do have 2 years where the prox 150 to 175 was negative, not even small, just negative. But the other 3 years, it was massively important. So this is why I'm not very comfortable with proximity, because it just seems to be inconsistent as a metric in of itself. So again, we'll go through this in prior leaderboards tomorrow. I'll definitely be scrutinizing this more heavily tomorrow over on Twitch. But I did want to show you show you the raw metrics as I was wanting to see them myself. So that's a look at Riviera from a course perspective, course by the numbers, and the players that finish in the top 30 in the past 5 years. Let's move to the early look file for the players in the field this week. And again, this is the tournament history tab in Fantasy National, or the strokes gained total tab, just split out by where players have performed throughout the 5 years. So you can see in 2 years, Victor Hovland he's played twice in 5 years. He's had an average finish of 5th. He's averaged gaining 5.1 strokes on approach both of those years. He's averaged gaining 2.8 strokes off the tee in those 2 years, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to filter out the players who have only played it once. I want to see the players who have consistently played the Genesis well year over year, what they have been doing well here. So you get guys like Victor and Wyndham Clark, John Rahm, Max Homa, Xander, Patrick Cantlay. I'm going to go all the way down to, well, I should probably include Spieth. He is 5 for 5 after all. Let's go down to Patrick Rogers. Anybody who is averaging a top 35 finish the past 5 years here at the Genesis, and get a feel for what they are doing well. So off the tee, this is a 1.2. Approach looks pretty darn high, 2.0. Around the green should be fairly high, but it does not look that way. It's only a 0.7, so that might be a little bit misleading. I still think around the green is going to be more important than off the tee. We saw that in graphical form. We'll see that, I'm pretty sure, in the leaderboards. But for the players who have played it the best, the off the tee has been more important than around the green. And then putting, down at Patrick Rogers, is a 1.4. But look at some of these names who are historically not very good putters, mainly Hideki. Hideki's positive here, and he's actually played this event very well. So anytime you see Hideki with positive putting, I generally take note. I suggest you do as well. But other players here, Xander, Max Homa, again, California guy, loves POA. John Rahm generally puts POA pretty darn well. Victor Hovland puts POA extremely well, especially compared to Bent and Bermuda. So there's a look at some strokes gained numbers. We'll come across here. Distance-wise, yeah, I mean, your best performers, Victor Hovland, Wyndham Clark, John Rahm, always have the distance. Xander can move it. Fitzpatrick is getting longer off the tee. Surprising to see Will Zalatoris be negative in distance in his 2 years that he's played here. But overall, more distance than not, obviously. So, going to be another factor we focus on. And look at the fairways. There's just some massive amounts of negatives in here. Zalatoris doesn't look like he's hit a fairway in either of the 2 years. Adam Scott, who is the leading strokes gained total player, negative quite a bit in terms of fairways. It's just not a big thing here. Finau, Xander, fairways just aren't a big thing here. Even though greens were only slightly more important than the average full field course, there is a lot of heavy propensity of green and heavy, high numbers here. So perhaps greens is something. And again, with the GCSA tournament fact sheet not out, I don't know offhand how big these greens are, just off the top of my head. So hopefully tomorrow night the GCSA tournament fact sheet will be out. We can really give this a good think on if greens are going to be a big factor, or if the greens are large, then maybe this is not as much of an important factor as it's leading on. We'll see. Birdies and bogeys. Let's see. You got Victor Hovland slightly higher in the birdies, but then there is a pretty good, I was going to say pretty good run. This is even. Bogeys here, and then bogeys down here. So the players that I've tried to highlight there for you, or at least Kirscher, those are the bogey avoidance, or they're more so in the bogey avoidance versus the birdies gained. So clearly, more often than not, it is bogey avoidance. It's not the only way to go about it. You see Patrick Cantlay's slightly higher in the birdies gained. Will Zalatoris looks like he is not able to avoid bogeys very well, but he's gaining the birdies. So, but for those that are high, or for those that are more birdies gained, it's actually pretty close, 4.9 to 4.2. So there's a 0.7, a 0.2, a 0.8. Whereas if you look at some of these bogey avoidance numbers compared to their birdies, that's 2.6. This is 1.8. That's only a 0.3. This is a 2.2, a 2.0, 3.6. So the players that are higher in the birdies gained are still relatively close in the bogey avoidance. And the players that are very high in the bogey avoidance, or they're separating themselves in the bogey avoidance from the birdies gained, are still playing well. So again, it's just re-emphasizing that I think bogey avoidance is going to be the biggest factor. And in fact, only one player is negative in the bogey avoidance. It's Will Zalatoris. All right, par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s. Oh, sorry, those are par 4s. I was going to say, those are some big numbers. Par 3s. I mean, look, Victor Hovland's negative. The highest here is a 3.8 from Fitzpatrick. Of the players that have averaged a top 35. Gosh dang it, mouse. What are you doing? That's only a 0.7. And you see, if there is an important range, it might be these two here, but these numbers aren't really all that big. So, little bit of importance, but we saw at least graphically that par 3s lagged behind the 4s and the 5s. Strokes gained par 4. Some pretty big numbers here. I mean, again, I stress it seemingly every week, but par fours are just so important because they're 70% of the PGA Tour. But no one is negative here. I am interested in seeing which length. Let's see. You've got a 1.5 and a 1.7. You do have a couple of big negative numbers in each of them. So Zalatoris and Fleetwood. I'm still leaning 450 to 500. It seems to be a little bit more consistent. But there's the numbers for the players who have played this event the best on those links of par fours. And finally, par fives. I mean, again, you got players that are negative in terms of par fives that have played this event very, very well. Matt Fitzpatrick, Colin Morikawa, K.H. Lee. So, par fives, it's a 1.0, so a little bit higher than the par threes. But you see the 550 to 6 looks to be the range here. A 0.6. Yeah. So, okay. Last thing for this evening, let's look at procs. Yeah, that's some pretty good proximity there. That's some pretty good proximity. It kind of falls off towards the bottom end of these players that have that are outside the top 30. But of the players inside the top 30, only two are negative. In terms of length, let's look at 150 to 175. Yeah, not too bad. 16.5. That's actually pretty good. 175 to 200 actually looks to be the strongest, if I had to guess. That's a 19.7. So, I'm not sure if there's going to be a specific length of proximity again this week. Might be prox total, but that's what tomorrow's Data Dive show will be for. And tomorrow over on Twitch, as I do the massive in-depth research for my viewers over on Twitch. That's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. Again, as a reminder, I will be live tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern over on Twitch. We're going to be looking first at the waste management. I'm going to gather those statistics, compare it to how I set up my mixed condition model. I will show you the lineups that I played, where I should have, where I could have done better, what I should have done, etc. Give myself a critique there. And then we're going to move on to the Genesis. We're going to be looking at the form of the prior winners, see if we can't establish a pattern. We're going to look at the matrix of the former winners, see if prior course performance is a big thing here. So I'm going to have a lot to do over on Twitch tomorrow. So give me a follow over there if you're interested in seeing all of that in-depth research. That'll be at 10:30. But James, thanks for jumping into chat. Appreciate it. Thanks for supporting the channel. And thanks to everyone out there who supports the channel, watches, listens, comments, likes the videos, and subscribes. I always appreciate it. Hopefully you had a successful waste management. If you did, reach out to me on social media or in the comments of the video. I want to be able to shout out members of the community that have success. And hopefully your Super Bowl wagers are going well, whatever wagers you made. Or if you are a Chiefs/Eagles fan, that your team just outright wins the game. But that's going to do it for the initial research show tonight. For all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Waste Management, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week at the Waste Management, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.